teaching in a multimodal world. It's a very fitting theme to be discussed in our library because right now we're talking about different types of literacy. So it's not just a conventional literacy, just reading from a book and writing in a piece of paper. Yeah, so it's not just that. You are facing a multimodal world. You are looking at pictures. You're looking at different kind of platforms and types of communication in your computer. Yeah, social media is there as well. So the world is changing, and that's why we need to know how to teach and how to survive. Yeah, as a teachers, how do you communicate with your students? Yeah, perhaps your students are digital natives, but we are from different generation. We are learning the digital world when we are already an adult. So there's some sort of difference of mindset and also way to tackle the multimodal world. And yeah, we're going to learn much more about this in the session. So please be engaged. Yeah? So ask a lot of questions and share your ideas. Yeah, you're very welcome to do that. And yeah, I would like to thank everyone who has already supported this event. Thank you so much, Bu Yusnita, and also Ibu Leli, the Vice Dean of Faculty of Letters, which are supporting us in the event. And tomorrow, there's also another workshop, yeah, supported by the Faculty of Letters. I thank everyone from the library. Thank you for supporting this event, the organization and everything. And everybody who are here, the lecturers, the students, thank you for coming and keep coming because we have a lot of events coming up. Yeah? All right, so without further ado, I opened the Kelasium workshop and enjoy the session. Thank you, Pak Chia. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih kami ucapkan kepada Ibu Nurenzia Yanuar PhD atas sambutan dan arahannya. Selanjutnya, yakni sesi penyerahan cindera mata. Sesi penyerahan cindera mata dari Kepala UPT Perpustakaan Universitas Negeri Malang kepada pemateri. Kepada Ibu Nurenzia Yanuar PhD dan Dr. Alexius Chia, kami persilakan. Terima kasih di atas penyerahan cindera mata kepada pemateri. Selanjutnya, kini kita akan memasuki sesi inti dari kegiatan kita hari ini, yaitu pemaparan materi oleh narasumber utama kita yang akan dimoderatori oleh Ibu Yusnita. Kepada Ibu Yusnita, kami persilakan.
Right, everyone, very good morning for all of us. How are you? We are going to have a lecture session as well, only this time it's not in the class, it's at the hall of the library. So we really hope that you enjoy this session. We have been listening a lot about multimodality, multimodal text, but we might not have a good idea about what it is. You've been around in Instagram? You use Instagram? Do you use TikTok? Do you think that you learn something from those? Yeah, sometimes you learn something from those. Now we are going to unfold, we are going to learn one by one what it is actually about and what in the Instagram, what in the TikTok that actually makes you learn something, what type of semiotic modes involved in those videos that you watch, in those picture books that you watch, in those fan fiction that you read. So we will learn all about this. Everyone, we have Dr. Alexius Chia with us. You can also call him Pak Chia. That's how we call him. We can? Thank you. So, Bapak Dr. Alexius Chia is a senior lecturer at the English Language and Literature Department, National Institute of Education. We are very happy to have him here. He's got a very nice office at the NIE campus, but he's willing to spend his time in our campus here in Malang. So we are very thankful to have him here. Once again, everyone, we are going to learn a lot more about multimodal text, about how to analyze multimodal text and multiliteracies from listening to his lecture. Everyone, let's give a big round of applause for Bapak Dr. Alexius Chia. Alex, we are going to have the session for about 1 hour or so, and then some students might need to run their classes around 11, and then some people will stay here, so we will have question and answer after. All right, shall we start?
Right. Sounds good.
Sounds great, thank you.
Thanks, Bu Yusnita. So good morning, everyone.
Introduce this.
Yeah. Don't mind if I sit down. My aging knees will not allow me to stand up for more than 2 hours. But first and foremost, how is everyone this morning? Great, that's wonderful. Um, uh, I would like to first and foremost, before I start my sharing with you, um, thank several people. First and foremost, to thank the Faculty of Letters, senior leadership, Faculty of Letters, UM, for your very kind invitation. I told Bu Yusnita that I've always wanted to come to Malang, and she said we will make it happen. So she actually made it happen. So thank you so much, Ibu Yusnita, for making this happen. It's my first time in Malang, and you really have a beautiful city. We arrived at about 7 last night. I didn't see anything because it was dark. I woke up at 5:30 this morning, and at the hotel, I saw the beautiful mountains and clouds greeting me. We had a short walk to the library, and it really is a very beautiful campus. We also like to thank the Central Library for hosting this. It really is a very nice auditorium, very conducive. So thank you very much. And for everybody who has made it possible, the IT team were great in getting my slides up so quickly. So just a brief introduction about myself. I'm Alexius Chia from Singapore. I lived my whole life in Singapore except for I think 4 years where I spent in my undergraduate days in Canada. I started off as an English and literature teacher before moving to have an academic career. I teach the undergraduates at NIE, but I also teach the head of departments who come to NIE for in-service. Singapore, brief introduction, those of you who've been there, we are very small. My geography is not very good, but if you drive from east to west, if you drive more than 1.5 hours, you'll drive into the sea. Yeah. North to south, if you drive more than 1 hour, you will land up in the sea. Actually, more accurately, you will land up in the Straits of Johor or the South China Sea. So that's how small we are. And the entire country, we have 5.9 million because we don't have to deal with different terrains, different geographies, um, different needs right across your country. And because we are so small, we are only NIE, or National Institute of Education, is the only teacher education institute in Singapore. In Indonesia, you have many, many. So that is an advantage in the sense that we have direct connection with our Ministry of Education, but it's also a disadvantage because we are the only one. If anything goes wrong, we cannot blame anybody else, right? So that is something that we are very concerned and conscious about. Okay, so that is a sort of a very brief introduction. My foray into multimedia, multimodality, multiliteracies has been a 20-year journey. Okay, when we realized that education does take place in the classrooms, but education and learning and literacy can take place outside of classrooms as well. As a young teacher, many years, many decades ago, I see that I have children. I used to teach high schools, junior high. So my 14, 15-year-olds are failing school, not doing very well in English, but they are very good at other things. They're extremely good at their computer games. They can go and read. At those days, internet not so common, but they can go to the computer shop, buy second-hand, third-hand manuals, read it so that they can get better scores. So then my question is, why is it that they cannot do reading comprehension, but they can actually read and understand all these complex manuals? Okay, and there's a very famous researcher called James G, for example, who did a big research project of called out of school literacies. Yeah. So the idea is, does literacy need to only take place in school? Can literacy actually take place out of school? And I think the answer is yes. Now with the internet, with YouTube, with TikTok, I'm sure many of you actually learn new things, not by attending classes, but by looking at how somebody else does it on YouTube, for example, or Instagram, for example. That's how my daughter learned how to crochet cute dolls, for example. That's how I learned how to cook some of the things that I feel like eating, but I cannot go out and buy it. Okay, so those are the kinds of literacies that we really are talking about. Okay, so the presentation today, I have about an hour, as Bu Yusnita said. So I want to spend some time just sharing the theory, but I also want to spend some time also demonstrating what I do with my initial teacher preparation candidates, my undergraduate, so that they can actually replicate that practice in school. So I'm going to give you very quickly the background. Then I'm going to introduce you to just one approach on how we can infuse multimodal text into the teaching of English. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that you as English teachers are going to face. And then I'm going to then look at very broad principles. In the past 15, 20 years of my working with school and in research studies, what are some of the principles that are important if we want to be serious about infusing multimodal text into the classroom? Okay, so let's go. Okay, background. Okay, now, when we look at literacy, your traditional way of looking at literacy is really to look at 4 skills, right? Listening, speaking, reading, writing. Then, of course, you have what supports the skills are your grammar and your vocabulary. And this is something that has not changed for about 100 years in terms of education. Okay, not so much 100 years. Maybe 100 years for reading and writing, but maybe in the past 40 years when speaking and listening was introduced into the English curriculum. Okay? Any idea why 50 years ago 60 years ago, there wasn't listening and speaking in the English curriculum. Do you have any idea why? Yeah. What do you need when you teach listening? Yeah. So the young people will say digital files. The old people will say cassette recorder, CDs. So listening and speaking entered as one of the literacy skills with the invention of the tape recorder. When you don't have the tape recorder, it's very difficult to teach it as a language skills because the moment you talk, if I'm not video recorded, for example, the moment you talk, your words disappear into the air. So it's very difficult to then teach it as a skill. But with the invention of the tape recorder, and of course eventually CD, now digital files, MP4, MP3, you are able to play back your, your audio over and over again. You are able to pick out certain parts. You're able to record your students, play back to them and say, listen, your pronunciation is not so correct. You're able to do that. So listening and writing are ancient skills that probably took place long time ago during the Shakespearean time, where there was a lot of reading and writing. Okay, but listening and speaking only entered English curricula about 50 years ago. Okay, now things have moved on very, very quickly since the 90s, the early 90s onwards. And that's where the idea of viewing and representing entered our curriculum. In some countries earlier, in some countries later. So if we look at Singapore, 2010, viewing and representing was included as the fifth and the sixth literacy skill. Philippines in 2010, they introduced viewing, and then in 2014, they introduced viewing and representing. If you look at your Indonesian curriculum, your curriculum Merdeka, 2022, you already had viewing and representing, and then mandatory implementation in 2025. So the question is, what is viewing and what is representing? It's something that is in the curriculum or in the various curricula, but teachers don't quite understand. It's the same as Singapore as well. For many schools in Singapore, even though we have had viewing and representing in our curriculum, some teachers still don't know how to teach it. Because a curriculum is a document that tells you what is there, it doesn't tell you the pedagogy. Yeah. So, what is viewing? Viewing is the active process of applying skills and learner strategies to interpret and understand a variety of visual text. Okay, so let me unpack that. Okay. You have a visual text like TikTok, for example, or YouTube, for example, or you have a poster, for example, that has visuals but has words as well, right? That's called the linguistic element and the visual elements. The process of looking at your poster and then understanding it and applying what you know is the process of viewing. Part of it is reading. The other parts really is not reading, because when you actually look at a poster with a mother and a child, for example, okay, you are not reading, but in a way you are quote unquote reading the picture. So that really is a process of viewing. Yeah. What is representing? Representing is the active process of applying skills and strategies to present facts, ideas, and points of view through a variety of audio-visual text forms. Meaning, now that I understand the poster and how I can interpret that, how do we in class then get the children to be able to produce something that's similar so that they can communicate some kind of message? We communicate in the old ways in two forms. We communicate through speaking and we communicate through writing. But in the 21st century, we also communicate through other things as well. And I think many of the young people in the room who engage in a lot of your online social media activity in terms of IG and TikTok, you're actually communicating not through linguistic elements, meaning words, you are communicating through visuals, music, sounds, and any other thing. So if you are producing a TikTok video and posting it, or an IG video, or series of pictures and commenting on it, that is what we call representing, right? So if you look at your 6 skills, okay, the skills are very connected. Listening, receptive. Productive, speaking. Reading, receptive. Productive will be writing. Viewing, receptive. Productive is representing. So in some curricula, they don't organize it in terms of 6 skills. In some of the curricula, they organize it in terms of 3 receptive skills and 3 productive skills. Receptive skills will be your listening, reading, and viewing. Your productive skills will be your speaking, writing, and representing. Okay? Right. Is everyone all right at the moment? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just being the teacher in me. Yes. So, what is the challenge? The challenge, if you look at my title, is finding place is tragic. Finding place in an already crowded neighborhood. The neighborhood already has listening, speaking, reading, writing, which very often our children struggle with. They struggle with vocabulary, they struggle with grammar. And then here we have to put in viewing and representing. So where do these skills fit in? How do you put these skills in? Okay. I think the advantage that you have compared to when Singapore started in 2010 is that in 2010, when we were introduced viewing and representing, a lot of the schools were making use of their old materials. So a lot of the old materials did not make way for viewing and representing. So sometimes the teachers just ignored it and just did reading, writing, essay writing, and that's all they did. But in Indonesia, you actually have, since 2022, your Nusantara textbooks, for example, and built into the textbooks are opportunities for you to, there are visuals there for you to teach viewing, but also links to outside resources where you can actually click on it and then do the viewing and the representing teaching. Okay? The other challenge will be, how do you teach them? I think that is the biggest challenge everywhere. Okay? It's in the curriculum, the resources are there, but how do you go about doing it? That's the biggest challenge. Question 3 will be, how do you assess them? Whether it's formal assessment or informal assessment, it's always a challenge, right? We are very good at essay marking. We are very good at testing for grammar, but how do you then assess your 15-year-olds that have produced a video documentary for you? Yeah, that will be also challenging as well. Okay. The other one will be, how do these support the other skills? Do viewing and representing stand on its own, or do they actually support your reading, writing, speaking, and reading? Okay. Next would be, which skills take precedence? Which are more important and which are less important? Here we are talking from a pedagogy point of view. We don't want to talk about an examination point of view. If we talk about an examination point of view, in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Malaysia, it's always reading and writing, because national exams will test you on reading and writing. In Singapore, we've introduced speaking and listening for many years already, and we have raised the percentage, especially in primary school, where oral C, speaking and listening is 25% of the whole paper. So then teachers started to take it more seriously, to really teach to teach listening and speaking. So because viewing and representing is so new, I don't think many education systems are brave enough to test it yet in national exams. So does it mean that we don't do it because it's not tested? If the answer is we don't teach it, then I think that we will severely disadvantage our children who already live in a world that is so media saturated, right? They are living in that media infused world. Yeah. And of course, the last thing will be, why do we teach them at all? Okay. And I think many of you will probably be able to answer this question. You know that we live in a complex world, and that very often when your children encounter media texts, we question whether they are real, they are not, and the idea of fake news is now very, very important. Yeah? Okay. So let me then go on to the approach on how to teach or how to infuse multimodal text into the curriculum. Okay. I'm introducing this framework called the Six Semiotics Framework. The originators of this framework is Boo and Ainsley, and they developed this framework in 2010. But myself and my colleague um, adapted this framework from 5 semiotics to 6 semiotics. Yeah. If you can't take down all the notes, don't worry. I will give you a set of um, the, the slides at the end of my session. Okay, I'll pass it over to Ibu Yusnita, and she can actually distribute the slides. Okay, so we have linguistic, and linguistic is something that we are very familiar with. We do it in reading and we do it in writing. Yeah, we have oral, which we are also quite familiar with because we do it in listening and we do it in speaking. Yeah, we have audio. Now, what's the difference between audio and oral? Because both involve listening. Okay, the difference is that in terms of oral, you are looking at linguistic aspects of it. So we are looking at speaking. But with audio, we are looking at everything that we hear that is not speaking. So music, noise, uh, sound effects, and even silence as well. If you actually watch any video, a movie, silence sometimes is used very deliberately to, to pass a particular message, especially horror movies, right? You get the right? So it's not so much the tapping, but that silence and the anticipation. So that silence also has meaning as well. Okay. Then we have gestural. So gestural simply means facial expressions, but it also means hand gestures as well. And gestures are very powerful in the sense that it doesn't require words, but it has very powerful meaning because it has to do with the signs and symbols. So let me demonstrate. We have my hand, for example, is different from, then if student not paying attention, student naughty, I don't have to say anything, right? So when we see gestures in video clips, we see gestures in posters, for example, it's very highly symbolic. Facial expressions as well are considered gestures as well. Yeah, when you see me and I smile, it's different when I, okay? And it doesn't require words. So it conveys meaning. Spatial. Spatial simply means if you take whatever you see as being framed in 4 corners, like oh, you're looking at me, for example, I'm sort of sitting in the middle of your frame, then it tells you something that I, at the moment, will, am the center of attention for this lecture. Yeah? But I see you differently, so you are in a different space as well. So the space matters. For example, in a picture book, for example, usually in the cover, you would have the main character take a very central space. Okay? But if you have a picture book in which the main character is right at the bottom left corner and is very small, it's not very big, it also tells you a message as well. Then you ask yourself, this is the main character, so why is the main character so small? Okay. Now, of course, the last one will be visual. Visual will be everything else that you see that is not spatial or gestural. So it has to do with color. It has to do with objects. Why do we put a cat there instead of a lion? Why is the book cover white instead of blue? Okay, we are looking at things like font size as well. Yeah. So when we're looking at titles, for example, then it's both linguistic, but it's also visual as well. So why are the fonts in this particular children's story so small? Because usually children's stories, the font size is very big. So is there deliberate? Is it deliberate? And so in some of the books, it's deliberate because as the main character gets bolder and more courageous, the font size becomes bigger and bigger through the pages. So that is very telling. So why am I spending time talking about this is because in the past, when primary, elementary school teachers look at picture books, they don't spend any time on the other things. So in Singapore, this is what happens. Good morning, children. Good morning, Miss Chia. Look at this picture book. So we have big book on easel or on PowerPoint. What's the title? Little Miss, I don't know, Little Miss City. Who's the author? Da, 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 da. Who is the illustrator? Da, 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 da. Do you want to hear the story? Yes, and then you move on. But then if you actually look at many covers of picture books, it's so rich. Why do we not spend time on it? Because if we actually spend time on it, it actually does several things. One, it stimulates the interest of the children. You are putting questions in their head so that you are allowing them to be mature readers and viewers. When, as adults, when we go browse a bookshop, for example, first thing that we look at is cover and title. And we are attracted to it. And because as mature readers and viewers, you have all these questions in your head. I wonder what this thing is about. I wonder why the book cover is wonder why the book cover is black. I wonder why they use this, wonder why they use this. But these these questions are there because we have lived life and we are mature enough and we enjoy these things. But our children may not necessarily have these questions, very important questions in their head. Okay, so that's one thing. Second, when you spend time on looking at the visuals and talking about it, you are making your children in your classes use the target language to negotiate meaning. Rather than you as a teacher tell them the story. You are asking them questions. So what do you think will happen next? Looking at the book cover, who do you think the main character is? What do you think the story is about? So you are actually spending time making them think in English or whatever target language, because you can do this in Bahasa Indonesian, in Mandarin, in whatever, but you're using that target language questions to get them to think in the target language and for them to talk in the target language as well. Third thing, as a class, when you do this, you are actually subconsciously, you are doing it deliberately, but the children are subconsciously developing vocabulary that would otherwise not be there if you didn't spend time talking about the book cover. Yeah, so there are many, I think, important points that would then warrant us spending some time looking at the visuals. Okay? Okay, so I have this for you. If you if you have your mobile phone, could you scan the QR code? Because what you have there is very small on the slide. So you can scan it and keep it on your own. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I've explained it in the previous slide already. So this is a summarized template or table which I have done up for you that tells you roughly what each semiotic mode is about and what are some examples of semiotic modes when you encounter them. So could you maybe spend the next 2 or 3 minutes just looking at it? Because as I said, I don't want to go through this in detail, but I just like you to be familiar with these. And of course, connect it to what I just explained to you in the previous slide. Is there anyone who is unable to access this? All can, right? We have the Gen Zs here, so they have no problems with IT. When I give workshops to teachers in school in their 50s and 60s, how? Then I'll end up printing worksheet here. But it really is such a waste of resources, right? Yeah. Okay, you can continue to keep this with you as I'll go into the next part so that if there's anything that you don't quite understand what I'm trying to say, then you can quickly go back to this table, okay? Normally, when I do 6 semiotic modes, it takes me 6 hours as a workshop so that we cover one by one in detail. But today we only have 1 hour. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do a demonstration now. Yeah. Okay, so this is a Singaporean picture book that's written by this person called Kwek Hong Shin. And it's a book for, I would say, between 5 to 8-year-olds. Yeah. In some cases, you can use it for 9-year-olds as well. I'm just using it as a demonstration. Okay. So normally, what I would do when I'm introducing visuals in the class is that I will go through a series of questions and will ask the questions as I would I will ask you the questions as I would in a class. So I'd like you to then pretend that you are 8-year-olds, okay, and try to answer this question. Okay, what we are looking at are only 4 of the semiotic modes. Okay, we are looking at linguistic, we are looking at visual, we are looking at gestural, and we are looking at spatial. Can anyone guess why we can't do oral and we can't do audio? Yes, excellent, because it's not a video, it's not an audio. So there's no way that we can do the oral semiotic mode or the audio semiotic mode. Okay? All right, so children, I'm going to introduce this picture book to you. Yeah. What is the first thing you notice in the cover? Why do you think your eyes go there first? Yeah, yeah. Yes. Sarong? Is that the first thing that all of you see? The sarong? Yeah. So why do you think your eyes go there first? Yes, some of you say color. What other? Yes, it's the size. Yeah, size, color. Somebody said title. Interesting. So the first thing that you zoom in was the title. Is that really the first thing or the second thing? Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. So, okay, you take out your student's cap and put back your teacher cap. Different people have different learning styles. You'd say that there are two semiotic modes that occupy a dominant position here. One would be the linguistic, the other is the visual. So depending on your propensity to learn and to take in, some people see the visual first, some people see the linguistic first. So you notice that in your classes, it will be the same thing as well. Interestingly, there was somebody over at that room that actually says that the sarong occupies a big space. So somebody there actually has that spatial semiotic mode that she actually zooms in on rather than the color. She talked about how it's a big space. Okay. For me, it doesn't matter because in a class of 40, 50, for example, you have children coming to you with different preferences and different learning styles as well. Okay? All right. Okay, put back your student cap again. Yeah. Okay. So why do you think the title what do you think the title Amazing Sarong means? What does the word amazing tells us about the sarong? Okay, so first question, what do you think the title The Amazing Sarong means? All of you are familiar with sarong, right? Have you ever referred to sarongs as amazing? Yeah. So what does the word amazing then imply or connote? When we say something is amazing, what does it mean? It's great. Yes. It's unique. Yes. Anybody else? When you say something's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So it has certain qualities that's not ordinary, perhaps extraordinary, right? So we know of different superheroes in our lives, for example. For me, I think that the Incredible Hulk is amazing. Yeah, but I wouldn't call myself amazing. So when talk about amazing, it has to have something that has unique qualities. So when we say the amazing sarong, so what do you think it actually means? It means that the sarong, yes, it's probably unique and probably something that is going to come up in a while, right? Okay. Now, what colors stand out in the cover? Yellows, reds, good. Yeah, mainly the bright colors, yellows and reds. So how do these colors make you feel? Yeah, the happy colors. So what are colors that are unhappy? If let's say, for example, we decide that we're going to change the color scheme of this. Yeah, we have dark blues, blacks, grays, browns, dark browns in combination, then it will not make us very happy. But this seems to be quite a happy cover, right? Okay. Now, let's move on very quickly now. How are the children standing or moving? What are their bodies doing? And what might that tell you about how they feel or what they're doing? Yes, they're running. Yeah. So how do you think? So, okay, so the other question would be, Why do you say that they are running? Yes, because of their gestures and, of course, of the position of their legs. So, how do you think that they are feeling? Excited? Happy? Yeah, okay. Now, where are the children and other things placed on the cover? What does that tell you about what is important in the picture? So let's talk about the children first, because they are. So where are the children placed in the cover? Yes, right in the center. Okay, what other objects are there? We have the chicken. Yes, very good, interesting, because this is the first time that I've done this cover with many types of different sets of teachers, but it's the first time somebody talked about the shadow. So the question is, you look at the shadow. I'm just going to jump a bit because you brought up a shadow. What does this tell you about the place and the setting? Village. And what about geographically? Where do you think it will be? Alaska? Swiss Alps? Yes, tropical island. And tropical island would be what kind of tropical island? Hawaii? Yeah. Yes, very good. So it's probably a Southeast Asian country because of the type of trees that you see. Can we identify the trees? It's probably coconut, and at the bottom, they look like banana trees, right? So you don't get banana trees and coconut trees in somewhere like Alaska, for example, or Switzerland, for example. So it's very interesting because how long have we spent doing this? We actually spent the past 10 minutes talking about this. So in Singapore, teachers who teach the old way of reading and writing would spend probably 2 minutes on the cover and move on. Now notice what we have actually discussed. What we're talking about, vocabulary. We're talking about using English as a target language to negotiate meaning. Okay, and we're talking about the story. We haven't even talked about what the story might be about yet. So let's look at the sarong now, because somebody brought up the sarong, right? What do you think it might be used for? Flying, interesting. Okay, why do you think it's flying? I mean, it's quite obvious. She's using it as a cape. So what? Okay, so now we test your prior knowledge. Why do you think it looks like a cape? Can you give examples of popular culture where people wear capes? Yes, Superman, Batman, yeah, yeah. So, okay, so now, because you've said that, flying, Superman, Batman, does it now make the title, The Amazing Sarong, have a bit more meaning? So what do you think the amazing in the Amazing Sarong actually is trying to refer to? Yes, very good. It's talking about the sarong and how it could possibly have some kind of uniqueness, some kind of possibly superhuman power. What do we usually use sarongs for? Yes, you wear them. For babies, maybe you put them to bed, use it to cover yourself. But I think, so what do you think this book is going to be about when it comes to having the sarong as the central character? Any guesses? There's no right or wrong answer because we haven't seen what's going to happen yet. But it's definitely going to be about the sarong, right? Yeah. It's probably going to be the different ways in which the sarong can be quite amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will just speed through this. So, what are the children's facial expressions like? How do you think they are feeling? Okay, happy, yeah, yeah. Where do you think the story is set? Already, because somebody brought up the shadows, I've actually asked this question already. Okay, why do you think the author and the illustrator chose to show this particular moment on the cover? What might it suggest about the story inside? And I think you sort of answered this already because of it being happy and of course the sarong being used as a cape is going to imply that there will be wonderful things that they're going to show about the sarong. Okay, I'm speeding this up because I am cognizant of time. Okay, so let's unpack the questions in terms of the 6 semiotic modes. So I've asked the questions actually more or less logically. I've prepared the questions for you because you're adults. But when you're preparing questions for your children, for example, then I don't suggest double barrel questions. Meaning many of my questions are question and then followed by another question. My suggestion is that for younger children, you break it up. But because I know that I don't have a lot of time today, I've actually put 2 or 3 questions together. Yeah? Okay, so what is the first thing you notice in the cover? What do you think your eyes go first? It's visual, but some of you is linguistic. Yeah. What do you think the title The Amazing Sarong means? Is a linguistic question. Okay. What does the word amazing tell us about the sarong? Is a linguistic question. Okay. How are the children sorry. How are the children standing or moving? What might that tell you? Is a gestural question. It's a gestural question that moves on to an opinion question. So it's a what might that tell you? How do you think? So that's a bit higher order, right? Next, what are the children and other things placed? It's a spatial question, where things are placed. Yeah. Look at the sarong. What do you think it might be about? It's both visual, gestural, and spatial, depending on the answers that come. Yeah. Children's expressions are gestural. Where do you think the story is set? Is visual. And lastly, why do you think the author and illustrator chose to show this particular moment? Is both visual, it could be gestural because of children being happy, and of course a sarong flying in the wind, and it's an inference question. So it's a bit higher order as well. Okay? So I find that having a systematic way of teachers asking questions are very important rather than to just have a gut feel how to go about asking questions. If you have an experienced teacher that's taught for 30 or 40 years, okay, he or she will probably do it quite naturally because of their love for text, their love for stories, to be able to do it. But I think as teachers that are starting out, in understanding your learners, teaching and learning in the semiotic modes, having a framework like this will be actually good for us to plan the questions that we want to ask of the learners. You can do it both ways. You can actually have notes where you just show the picture and ask the questions, or you can do it how I do it. Put it on PowerPoint slide and then have the questions come out. There are a variety of ways of doing it. Okay? Okay. So, sorry, before I move on to challenges, are there any questions? Yeah. Everybody okay? Yeah. Yeah.
So if we have a question along the way, we can just invite them.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So everyone, if you have any question at all about anything that we have listened from Dr. Chia so far, you can raise your hand. You can imagine that in your linguistics classes, for example, or in your interest in analysis, you might encounter pictures. It doesn't have to be picture books like this. It can be maybe you're wondering in the comics that you read why the picture is like this and like that, why you have kapow or something. So we can talk about that as well. You might also be wondering why the analysis of images or pictures is here in the linguistics analysis. You can also question things like that. So, any questions? All right. We have one from Ibu Leli actually.
Thank you, Dr. Chia. Very wonderful talk. Very quick question, Doctor, regarding the grammar of gesture.
Yes.
Well, for the linguistic, oral, audio input, they might be quite straightforward in terms of grammar. We can really see the pattern, and when we go back to the language, the target language that student learning, yeah, it's very specific and clear. But regarding the gesture, how in that case, how we teach, or is there any ways to teach the pattern and the grammar?
Yes, that's a very good question, Ibu. And you don't have to figure this out because um, the original authors, Ainsley and Bull, actually have many tables, which I'll share with Ibu Yusnita, where you can break it up into gestures come in the form of body language. It comes in the form of facial expressions. So if you actually zoom in on facial expressions, for example, the quote-unquote grammar of facial expressions in using your words would largely be the vocabulary that we are actually familiar with already. So for example, your eyes, shape of your eyebrows, your lips. So if you say somebody is angry, for example, what does it mean in terms of gestures? Okay, in terms of body language, the person could be standing with 2 feet on the ground. The person could have fists that are clenched. So these are vocabulary which you already know, but putting it into the grammar of the semiotics may be challenging for teachers because you need to figure it out. So Ainsley and Bull has actually in a chapter done that for us already. So if I'm angry, for example, normally when I ask the children, you think that the character is angry, this is angry. So I say, why do you think they're angry? Angry law? So they don't have that vocabulary to do it. So the thing is that if we just break it down, when somebody's angry, chances are that their brows are furrowed, right? Their eyes are actually big, either big or it could be small and staring intently when you're angry. So different people express anger quite differently. If you're angry, your mouth could be wide open with a shocked expression because you're so angry, or your lips could be pursed. So it really depends on the situation and that multimodal text, what it's doing. So, so we break that out into body facial expressions. Then we can actually move on down the body to whether your shoulders are relaxed, your shoulders are tense, whether your fists are clenched or not. So those are the things that if we are serious about multimodal text, then as teachers, you need to also learn that set of vocabulary that then forms the grammar of visual text. So that really is an excellent question. Very specific also would be all the other semiotic modes. It's just that I think for oral and linguistic, because we are all familiar with teaching, reading, teaching, speaking, we are familiar with that. But what we are not familiar with will be the other semiotic modes. For example, audio. We are really looking at rhythm. We are looking at timbre. We are looking at silence. We are looking at pitch. So those are the things that we need to learn. For visual, we are looking at color, right? we are looking at intensity, we are looking at a lot of other things as well. So what I find really wonderful about this framework that Bo and Ainsley has developed is that in their original 2010 book, they actually have several pages in which they break it down for us. So that really will be the grammar of your multimodal text. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that question. Yeah, yeah. I'm pausing now because the rest of it really is challenges what we are doing. But I'm pausing now because this really is the pedagogy, is the approach.
So everyone, I hope we have a clear idea about what multimodal text is and how to understand the elements inside it, so that you uh, you can keep questioning actually what's in multimodal text and what actually makes you understand. Oh, I get the meaning of this from this image because of these elements. So you need to keep developing that idea in you. So we will have more explanation of the challenges,
Yes,
Alex. Yeah,
yes.
all right.
Okay. Yeah. So challenges. I think there are several challenges. One would be definitely the confidence level of the English language teacher. Um, and confidence is something that you can develop when you actually have the knowledge and the content and the practice to do it. So I encourage you to do this because you will get better and better at it. And it's fine to tell your children, I don't know. Let's find out together. Or let me find out this afternoon and I'll give you the answer tomorrow, for example, because we are all new to this. Yeah. Also, the other thing will be unfamiliarity with various frameworks to unpack multimodal text. In Singapore, for 2010, we did not adopt a framework. So teachers just, instead of finding their framework, they just didn't teach viewing and representing. They just concentrated on reading and writing, listening and speaking. So for syllabus 2020, we insisted at NIE that the MOE adopts a framework. So they adopted the 5 semiotic framework from Ainsley and Bo. So then things got a bit better because there is a theory and approach behind that. Okay. The other thing would be that the purpose of multimodal text usage is unclear. Why do you use it in the first place? Okay, so I just quickly unpack the, just going back there. Okay, it doesn't matter. The last point was purpose of multimodal text is unclear. Very often, multimodal text in real life is used as the message to convey a meaning. How many of you are Blackpink and BTS fans here? The poster for BTS coming to your city, for example, or Jakarta, for example, somewhere else, for example, is the central message. That's the multimodal text. But very often in education, a multimodal text is used as a support for something else, or teachers see it as a support for something else. Like in the old days, in science, for example, the line diagram is just there. You see it or you don't see it, it doesn't matter. The linguistic part is most important. But science nowadays, your visuals are as important as the linguistic element because both will tell you what the experiment is about. Both will tell you what that particular scientific process is about. So, like in English and in real life, for example, the linguistic sits together with the visuals and everything else to tell you one message. So, that I think is something that teachers who are unfamiliar with multimodal text are not aware of. So, they very often ignore the pictures and just look at the linguistic elements. Okay. So, what are some principles for infusing multimodal text? This is what I think Ibu brought up just now about the grammar of gestures and the grammar. We need to develop a meta language to talk about multimodal text. All of you are English students, right? So you know what a meta language is about, right? Meta language is a language to talk about language. So if you are linguistic students, your linguistic courses will give you the meta language to talk about language. So similarly, multimodal text, we need to have a meta language. So what we have recommended in Singapore is that we use the Bull and Ainsley framework and use that meta language to talk about multimodal text. There are many other frameworks that are available, but what I found was that the Bull and Ainsley framework is easy to understand because Bull and Ainsley, who work out of Australia, has worked with, they generally were from university, but now they are private consultants and they work with teachers across Australia. And so they have the teacher in mind rather than research in mind. Okay? These are some of the other people that have frameworks. Yeah. Next, if you actually look at the meta language and the kinds of questions, as I demonstrated, teacher questions are extremely important. And so we make use of the framework and the meta language to generate questions so that your students get a better understanding of the multimodal text. So these are just some examples. Yeah? So for oral, which I haven't had time to do because we didn't have a video, it could be, is there dialogue or is there monologue in the video? What is the tone of the speech? Is it serious? Is it lighthearted? Are there changes in volume, in pace? So these are taken from the Bull and Ainsley framework and posed as questions. Yeah? Does the dialogue work together with other modes of communication like the visuals? Okay. In terms of visuals, okay, number 2, which visuals capture your attention? From which point of view are you looking at? So that's the meta language of point of view. Is it eye level? Is it bird's eye? So you're pretending you're a bird on a tree and you're looking down, so that's bird's eye. And the interesting one will be worm's eye. So you pretend that you're an earthworm and you just stuck your head out of the ground and you're looking up. So that will be a worm's eye. So think about a story like Jack and the Beanstalk. What happened when Jack woke up in the morning after the mother scolded him and threw the magic beans out? Are you all familiar with Jack and the Beanstalk? Yeah. I learned an important lesson in Bandung that old people like me who know certain stories, young people like you all don't know the stories because of different generation. But Jack and the Beanstalk, basically the story is that he sold the family cow. Instead for money, he was given magic beans. The mother scolded him to say, silly boy, right? And then the mother took the beans, threw it out. But overnight, it was indeed magic beans because what happened was that a huge beanstalk grew. So Jack, imagine Jack looking at, and the beanstalk was so huge, it grew up into the sky. Okay. So the beanstalk will be, we were as big as the Meranti trees, for example. Okay. So when you're Jack looking up, that will be worm's eye. Okay. So this would be the meta language that we use to ask questions and to discuss the multimodal text. Okay. Now, principle 2. Use multimodal text in a similar way that you would a text for reading and listening. So we use a video in place of reading and listening because that text is important and it's rich. So like reading and listening, viewing is a receptive skill. Multimodal texts are rich and they can be exploited for a variety of purposes, and your choices should be deliberate. I think what happens with my students when I observe them at practicum is that they will say, oh, Dr. Chia coming. He's very into multimodal text. So we have to show a video. So they show a 5 minutes video. Then they ask the students 2 questions on the video. Then after they showing the video, they tell the children, oh, okay, after this, we will do summary writing. Then my question is, you showed such an interesting video about the oceans and the fish dying. Then why are you moving to summary writing where it has nothing to do with the video at all? So when I asked them, they said, Oh, I showed the video because my friends told me that you're very into multimodal text. So the thing is that what the student teacher has done is not exploited the richness of this video about global warming, about pollution, and how this could possibly be a substitute for a very rich reading complete text, for example, or very rich listening text, and to use it to develop other language skills as well. Okay. Now, principle three, multimodal text should be integrated within an English unit of work. It shouldn't be just sitting outside by the way. Okay, we do it between reading and writing. So we have 5 minutes, I show you the video. It should not be used as a filler activity because multimodal texts are rich resources. So they should not be relegated to the status of hook activities or tuning in activities. Okay? Principle four, we need to change our current attitude or traditional attitudes towards teaching and learning and unit design. These are for the administrators and the lecturers in this room here. Because we really need to move from test-focused teaching to a more holistic language teaching and learning model. So it requires then a shift in dispositions towards text. If we are obsessed with test-focused teaching, then we will always have reading and linguistic text as the most important thing in our classrooms. But we all know that teaching and learning is not just about exams. Teaching and learning is enabling our children, let's say for teaching and learning English language, is our ability to effectively have our children be bilingual, to be able to go out and understand the text that they encounter, whether it's in Bahasa or English. It's also us having them have all the questions in their heads so they are not scammed, they are not cheated. Because you have these multimodal texts out there that are meant to cheat, meant to deceive, and meant to scam. So that is that social consciousness part of our English curriculum that very often is forgotten because we are so worried that they will not pass the exams or do well in the exams. I think as English teachers, we have two roles to play. Help them pass the exams, but also help develop good discerning citizens as well. Yeah. Right. So I'm actually done with my presentation. Yes, it's 10:33. So I basically went through with you the background of multimodal text and why we're actually doing this. A lot of it has to do with the time that we are living in, the 21st century, where we have to deal with multimodal text. I presented you with an approach, which is a 6 semiotic modes. We spent quite a bit of time on it. I gave a demonstration. I looked at challenges, and there are many challenges. A lot of it is teacher confidence, teacher competencies. I don't think the lack of a framework is an issue anymore because now we have quite a number of frameworks that we can refer to, and I'm sharing with you one. And then finally, we looked at principles of infusing multimodal text. That on top of certain challenges, we need to keep these four things in mind if we want our curriculum to be successful when we are infusing multimodal text into our English curriculum. Okay, so with that, I am done. We have quite a bit of time for questions because I know some of you might be rushing off for class as well. But we did say we'll have about 45 minutes to an hour for discussion.
Okay. Everyone, let's give a big round of applause for the presentation. All right. So once again, we are open for questions at the moment. You can have any questions. It might be related into the course that you're doing right now. It might not be related to any courses that you are doing right now. However, these... Hmm? Oh, yeah. Bu Ransi just told me that we've got souvenirs, we've got some token of appreciation for those who ask interesting questions in the session. So before you rush to your class, You can discuss with the friend next to you probably and pose your questions if you have any.
That's so interesting because you ask a question that's linguistic, and the library actually is giving you a gift as a gesture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
That is a gesture of appreciation. Yes. I understand that some of us are undergrad students. We might not have much experiences with linguistics analysis or multimodal analysis just yet. But I also noticed we have some postgrads in the room. Yeah. Uh-huh. Do you want to ask questions? Oh, okay. Fendi, do you want to ask questions as well after this one? The one from here.
Thank you so much for insightful sharing. For me, as the English teacher, it's quite challenging to assist our student. Actually, to shift our paradigm from a test or English, go to the dynamic assessment. And my question is how to habituate ourselves as a teachers to think out of the box to present insightful multimodal literacy, especially in shifting a paradigm in dynamic assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pat, for that question. Um, it's an interesting question that, as a practicing teacher, you ask yourself all the time. But going back to what I just said earlier, as English teachers, we have two responsibilities. One responsibility is to help them pass the exams, especially the important exams that uh, is very popular in Southeast Asia, right? These are what you call your terminal exams. But I think our other responsibility is one that is, for me, more important, and that is to provide them with the literacy skills so that they can move on to the next level. So your in answer to your question about assessment, my take, and some of you might agree with me because in Singapore many people disagree with me, is that not everything needs to be assessed. Not everything needs to be assessed formally. But if I wanted to assess you this morning, I wouldn't give you an exam. I wouldn't give you a test. I wouldn't flash QR code to say, okay, next 15 minutes, I'm going to give you a test of multimodality. But I would actually say now that you actually passed very well because of your answers that you have given to me, the questions that are coming out from the audience, and how you actually together collectively analyze the amazing sarong. So as an experienced teacher, I can say that quite safely, many of you actually understood what I've done. I don't need to give you a half an hour test on this. So that's something I think that we need to think about, because if we continue to test formally, what we call summative assessment, then I think our students would get very anxious. Especially when I was in school, every time there's pop quiz, and pop quiz will be added into your final assessment. So all of us have very, very high stress levels because in the old days, it's always about quiz and testing. But through the years, we've developed an understanding of different kinds of assessment, right? You have summative assessment, but you also have assessment for learning, assessment of learning. So what I'm trying to do is that because multimodal text is so new, I think we use it for a variety of purposes. One, because it's in your curriculum, you teach it. It's not being tested yet. But I think second, we are using it also to develop other skills as well. Social awareness skills, but also the development of grammar, oral grammar, as well as vocabulary. So the example I gave you about how you describe somebody who is angry, for example. You have learned what to say about the eyebrows, what you say about the eyes, what you say about the lips that are pursed, for example. If you were to be very deliberate, you make use of that multimodal visual grammar lesson and vocab lesson, and remind them that in their writing of the narrative, you can also use it next time as well. So it could be a very deliberate way of introducing vocab so that they improve in their writing, they improve in their speaking as well. Yeah. Assessment is something that I think is always very contentious, and people are also anxious because it's in a way seen as a very tangible way of measuring success. But I think as an experienced teacher, you know whether your students understand or not understand. So sometimes we want to just leave certain things not to be assessed in a summative way. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So once again, everyone, while we believe that viewing and representing skills are very supportive in the development of language learning, we also believe that to some extent, maybe and not everything needs to be assessed. With assessment, especially with the national assessment, we are going to wait for the policies from our Ministry of Education on what type of assessment we need to do for our school students. This includes whether we are going to have our national exam to be imposed again. That's one, because then it will have impact on the policies of assessments in different school levels. So that's another headache for us English teachers at schools. With the change of the terminology of Curriculum Merdeka into Curriculum Nasional, right now it is the national curriculum, even though the content is the same, but they want different jargons. And then with that, our current ministry also want to impose a deep learning approach into our curriculum. So that's another headache that we need to learn about, which is okay. We're going to keep going and learn. After all, our job is a teacher. We are responsible for everything that happens in the classroom, how to facilitate our students in different ways that we can to facilitate good language learning. Do we have any more questions, everyone? We have Fendi here.
Okay, thanks for the time. Actually, my question here relates to the first slide. In the first slide, we have language learning, and it covers some skills like reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we have additional skills, that's viewing and representing. My question here is: do we have micro skill and micro skills for viewing and representing? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. In terms of micro skills, because viewing, okay, if we look at listening, speaking, reading, and writing, it really is purely linguistic. So in the old days, we can link it uh, very comfortably to literacy. Yeah. I haven't had the time to talk about multiliteracies, but in the 21st century, when we look at multiliteracies, it's not only being able to read and write, it's also the ability um, to make use of the computer, for example, ICT skills, your digital literacy, for example, your multicultural literacy, your multimodal literacy, your critical literacy, and a lot of it that I've talked about today is not non-linguistic. So in terms of them breaking it up into micro skills, like for example, it's quite easy to break up speaking into micro skills because you can break it up into pronunciation, enunciation. We can actually look at phonics, for example. The viewing and representing micro skills goes back to what Ibu just talked about. It really is the grammar of the different semiotic modes. Because we are not dealing with now linguistic elements, we are dealing with elements that people in a communications department at a university doing media studies have been doing for many, many years. Yeah, because they're dealing with images, they're dealing with whether it's close up, is zoom in, zoom out. We're looking at colors, we're looking at lighting and all that. So that really would be the different micro skills, which then makes it very challenging because they're all non-linguistic. So that also means that it's actually new knowledge for English teachers to pick up because viewing and representing appears in our English department and in our English departments, in our English curriculum, uh, more explicitly than the other subjects. But I know that in science, even though it's not mentioned very clearly, multimodal literacy is extremely important in science. But in different emphasis. So if you're a science teacher and you're teaching lab, for example, the oral linguistic element is as important as your gestures. I was a science student all the way till grade 12. So I realized that by just speaking is not enough. The teacher needs to do the demonstration, especially when you're doing titration, for example, right? You have to swirl, you have to do this, you have to do this. So that kind of gestures is very important in science. Okay, and your volumetric analysis is quite different from your qualitative analysis, for example, because it takes different skills, different knowledge, and different gestures to do the science equipment. So actually, multiliteracies and multimodality really started off for science education. People like Gunter Kress, Van Leeuwen, that's part of the New London group, talked about that kind of literacy that's needed on top of your linguistic literacy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh, just in correction, the problem also is that in literacy we have one grammar. In multimodality, there are different people with different frameworks as well. So the micro skills were a bit different as well. Actually, it's not true because I think some of you come from some of the graduate students, people like Bu Yusnita come from the Australian system where we have another grammar, which is systemic functional grammar, which is actually a very different grammar from the kind of grammar that we do in Asia, for example. So that also requires different types of meta language, different kinds of terminology as well. Yeah. So the idea is, what framework will you adopt? Because in one slide, I gave you a list of different people working on it. So for example, Cope and Calentis, that works out of the US, has a different semiotic framework. They actually have a semiotic mode called texture or tactile, meaning whether something is smooth, something is rough. You're feeling it, you're not looking at it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. About multimodal text, actually, it reminds me of a paper that I have read from a German researcher, Hartmut Stockel. So this paper is from 2015. He mentioned that multimodality is the discovery of the obvious, meaning that as long as we live, we have seen all of these making meaning modes. We have seen theaters, we have seen paintings, we have seen people talking with gestures in plays or reciting poems. But we never thought of this in structure or systematic ways on how then to develop the understanding of this. It's not until the 1994 where Michael O'Toole developed the language of the displayed art. So we begin to find structure. The logic behind this is if you can find the structure or pattern in language, language can have subject, predicate, object, then we can understand how to compose words into sentences, into text, paragraph, etc. What about images? How do we put colors? How do we put lines? How do we put shape and make it into meanings? How do we construct PowerPoints like this? How do we construct messages in posters, for example? So there is a grammar in visual as well that is then developed by the people in the New London group by Kress and Van Leeuwen, and then also a lot of other researchers. And now this is our job to understand what meaning-making resources is used in this composition so that we can not only understand what we see by viewing, but also understand how to compose by representing. That's probably the logic or the way of thinking of understanding multimodal text. Thank you so much. One last question, maybe? Yeah, we have one other question.
Okay, thank you. So I'm actually a science educational, I'm actually in science educational major, but I'm so grateful I signed up for this since I find the multimodal text is actually aligned with the students' argumentation during science lessons. Yes. So my question is, how do you think it actually helps students to build their arguments? Does it uh, does it the the mod is it the mood to build the argumentation? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think in terms of, okay, so for English education is very broad because we deal with almost anything, but I think in science education, very specific. So if you're building an argument in science, for example, then students and teachers then need to decide whether the argument will be, okay, chances are that the argument will be linguistic as dominant, but then when do you bring in the multimodality to support the argument? Then it will be the choice of text form that you're bringing it in. Are you bringing in a diagram? Are you bringing in a table? Are you bringing in a picture that shows the different process? So for example, in science, one of the most important things that high school students need to know is the Haber process, for example. Okay, or in elementary school, the process of photosynthesis, for example. So do you present photosynthesis as one picture? Chances are not. You usually are going to present photosynthesis as a series of picture. Very similar like in earth science, geography is your water cycle, for example. So those are decisions that we take for granted, but it's not something that the students learning science actually know automatically. So what we do is we take real life examples of how people present information and we deconstruct it. Because a table is very different from a process picture, which is very different from one visual. Chances are that in science education, you never have a picture like Amazing Sarong because it doesn't make sense. Science is about explanation, it's about procedure. So it also a particular type of multimodal text that's required in science teaching, but also science argumentation as well. Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's also very interesting to know that multimodality is relevant to field of studies other than English education. But it is actually true because a lot of linguists who works in the area of multimodality actually comes from science.
Yes.
We have Keo Halloran from Curtin University and Liverpool University, who was actually guru matematika or mathematics teacher at the beginning, but then she's interested in linguistics, and hence she learned further about multimodality. We also have a lot of analysis of multimodal text in science from researchers like Len Unsworth. So the relevance of multimodality in fields other than language learning is also relevant in
Social
today's world.
science,
Social
like
sciences as well.
geography,
Yeah, social science, geography,
history, because of all
and yeah,
the tables, the maps,
the timeline,
the
the
timelines.
maps, yeah.
Yes.
In the next couple of semesters, you will probably have a course which is called discourse analysis. You might learn a little bit more or much more about this, or in trends and issues in linguistics, you will learn much more of that if you have the class with me. That is promoting myself. All right. Okay, everyone, do we still have any more questions? I think it is safe to say that we're done with the job today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being
Let's have another
such a captive
big round of
audience.
applause. Yes. Once again, everyone, the relevance of us learning multimodal text and multimodality is dealing a lot with the type of text that we encounter in our life today with the digital world. You deal a lot with pictures, you deal a lot with, I don't know if you still read, but maybe some of the things that you read contains combination of the 6 semiotic modes that we have learned today. I hope we learned something from today's session. We thank Dr. Alexius Chia for giving us the lecture today. See you again in the next session. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada moderator yang telah memandu jalannya pemaparan materi. Selanjutnya bagi peserta yang bertanya dapat maju untuk menerima hadiah dari panitia. Bagi teman-teman dapat mengisi link presensi yang tertera dalam layar proyektor untuk mengklaim sertifikat. Terima kasih saya ucapkan, diperkenankan untuk kembali ke tempat. Demikianlah rangkaian acara hari ini yang telah kita lalui bersama. Semoga kegiatan ini memberikan wawasan dan ilmu yang bermanfaat, serta menjadi langkah awal yang lebih kuat dalam meningkatkan kualitas riset dan pembelajaran di lingkungan Universitas Negeri Malang. Kami juga mengundang Bapak Ibu serta rekan-rekan mahasiswa untuk terus mengikuti seri kegiatan Kelasium berikutnya yang akan mengangkat topik-topik yang tak kalah menarik. Akhir kata, saya selaku pembawa acara mohon maaf apabila dalam pelaksanaan terdapat kekurangan atau kekeliruan. Terima kasih atas partisipasi dan perhatian Bapak Ibu sekalian. Sampai jumpa di kesempatan berikutnya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.